thank you for joining. We have our wonderful advisory committee here, as well as some people who I worked with in the boot camp years ago. Everyone here has been doing amazing things in the field, and I'm very excited to hear about all their unique perspectives. I think this session was initially going to be like a party to announce the launch of our new licensed career school. It was a year-long effort, and some of the members here on the advisory committee played a big role in that in reviewing our curriculum. So we're gonna have a big party. It's gonna be a day-long thing. We're all gonna celebrate, but then I was feeling a little bit too much pressure to organize like a day-long conference. It wasn't really feeling like a fun party. So we're keeping it a bit more casual. I have some questions prepared, and then we're gonna turn it over to you to ask questions. And I imagine a lot of them might be about how to stand out in the field and what advice we might have for people who are transitioning right now. So wealth of experience. We also have a range of perspectives, so we're probably going to get a wide array of perspectives on this stuff here. So yeah, why don't we start by introducing ourselves? So Tanasha, maybe we can start with you, and you can let people know kind of how you got into the instructional design space and how you made it to where you are now in your career.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Tanasha Gaines. I'm currently the Senior Manager of Learning Operations at General Assembly's an education company. And I consult, I'm a consultant as well with with a background in instructional design, change management, and workforce transformation. And so I really did get started not as an instructional designer. I was just more from the military, help desk, technical support, but I ended up being the person to help and develop technical documentations and step-by-step steps for things for people, students, instructors, things like that. And then I got formal education in instructional design. And my first job as an instructional designer was with higher ed as an instructional designer, designing courses, e-learning, ILT, web-based training, all those things. And so today, here I am going through a lot of corporate, higher ed, military, health and human services programs, and found my way through not only instructional design, but change management and workforce development. And so here I am today with operations in learning.
All right, wonderful. Thanks, Tanasha. We look forward to learning from you. How about you, Min? Let's turn it over to you.
My name is Min. I'm currently a director of product management at Fidelity Investments. Before joining that, I was working in academia for about 15 years. And COVID happens. I was thinking, oh, I have some time to think about what I can be doing in the future. And I met Devlin and his amazing boot camp that helped me to make the transition from higher education to instructional design. I started my career at Fidelity as an instructional designer. We call it learning experience architect. I would say I did exceptionally well in this role because of Devlin's help and a lot of the learning principles and the design ideas. And I get to transfer from the bootcamp to my role. And that's why I got a few promotions after that. And now I'm working in customer experience design. When I was working in higher education, I also do curriculum design and also development as well. And so I also pick up a lot of the coding skills. Of course, that's strengthening that through Devlin's bootcamp as well. Emily?
Great, thank you, Min. And some of you might recognize Min because when Min was in the boot camp years ago, she was brave enough to do a mock interview with a hiring manager live for hundreds of people. So if you haven't seen that yet and you want some interview practice, that's on YouTube, and you could see Min then, and then you can compare it to Min now after you use L&D experience. Cool, thank you, Min. Let's turn it over to you, Leigh Ann.
Hi, everybody. I'm Leigh Ann Morgan. I am a senior instructional designer, and I work currently in the corporate sector. I started out my career actually as a professor in food nutrition, so as a dietitian, and I taught many years. And then I transitioned into instructional design and technology, ended up getting a second master's in that at the university where I was teaching. So absolutely fell in love with that. And from there, I went directly into the corporate world, have done some consulting in higher ed, as well as some private freelancing as well. But most of my 9 to 5 is spent at senior ID, but started out in teaching in higher education.
Great. Yeah, I'm sure we have a lot of people here who are transitioning from education right now as well. So thank you, Leigh Ann. Let's turn it over to you, Keith.
Yeah, so I'm Keith Wilson. I'm the Director of Cybersecurity Education for AttackIQ, the cybersecurity software company. I got into the ID field unintentionally, but I'm happy that I did. I worked in cybersecurity for close to 20 years and was working in technical sales when COVID hit. And our company decided we wanted to do a marketing program online that would give free education in cybersecurity. I had done some courses in instructional design, had a bit of training in it, which made me the most qualified person at the time. So here we are 5 years later. The program's got over 70,000 people around the world. And I run it almost single-handedly, but I do contract a lot of instructional designers and I work with a lot of LMS vendors. So I get taken, I have a different point of view than a lot of people because I don't focus on just instructional design. I kind of focus on that plus everything that goes around it. So I think maybe that might make me a little bit different than some of the other panelists up here today.
Yeah, it'll be great to have your perspective on things, and it already has been. So wonderful. All right, Laura, we'll go over to you, and then we'll dive into some questions.
Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Strombergson. And like many of the folks on this panel, I started out in higher education as well. So I was getting my PhD at Vanderbilt University, and I fell in love with facilitation and also became really interested in how we can leverage the digital in the classroom space and beyond. So then COVID hit and changed our lives, like for many of us. And I decided to transition outside of academia and was fortunate enough to meet Devlin and work in the boot camp and do all of that stuff. So that was really fantastic. And since then, I've worked within instructional design. I've worked within program design, performance consulting, that sort of range in a number of different industries. I've been fortunate enough to be with some really great companies, and I'm currently looking for my next role as well. So a little shameless plug there for myself. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here today and excited to help answer questions and hopefully help guide others.
Great. Yeah, it'll be good to have your perspective on that too, especially as someone actively looking for a new role and maybe, doing some of those portfolio updates and stuff that all of us have to do between roles sometimes.
That
Great. And Marie made it just in time too for the introductions.
So I've been in instructional design, adult learning of some sort for 13 years now. And before that, I taught undergrads for 4 years. I started out in the long-term care industry. We were training administrators and caregivers for residential facilities for children, adults, and seniors. I had a blast with that. What I really loved was the wellness focus. So not focusing on making the facility get through day to day and what's our bottom line, but expanding the business by having satisfied, well taken care of residents. And so that really spoke with my heart because my big thing is wellness and emotional intelligence and taking care of people. My current role is in corporate leadership training, particularly work in the in the hospitality industry. We train, we've worked with MGM. We recently finished with Fontainebleau, who opened about a year ago here in Vegas. My first big project was with MGM, and it was on a leadership wellness track, a year-long, this amazing program that was oriented towards lead yourself first, how you can be a well leader and take care of your team members as well. And that was a really fun project. We also do brand orientations. I'm actually wrapping one up right now. We've got this client who rebranded and big, huge Hollywood active. And so I got to figure out how to get their, Midwestern staff, some of whom hate California, on board with this, shiny, this shiny brand that they're opening in a couple of months. So that's really fun for me. I love adult learning just because it's focused on problem solving more than conveying information. And like scenario-based learning, I think, is a really great way to present information because you're critically thinking and using creative problem solving while you're also learning. Anything else you wanted me to cover, Devlin? I'm sorry, I popped in late.
No, that was great. That was a good introduction. We're just now going to dive into our questions for the panel. No pressure for all of you to answer every question. Just if it speaks to you, feel free to speak up. I have 6 or 7 questions prepared, and I want to make sure we have some time for questions from the audience because I can see some already rolling in. So, yeah, the first we'll start big. What is the biggest change y'all have seen in the industry since getting involved? I know some of you it's been a few years, some of you it's been 10 or 15 or more. So, yeah, how do you see the industry changing or moving?
I can go first on that one. I think it's going to be the same answer with any industry that you ask about this, and it's AI, right? AI is disrupting everything. And I'm a technologist too, so I spend a lot of time looking at AI and what it can do. And I think a lot of people are looking at it as a competitor to them, which it is if you're bad at your job right now. Not to say it's not going to get better. Like AI is going to get better for sure. But right now, we see companies rolling it out and then pulling it back again. Go, oh, we made a mistake. That didn't work out well. And there's lots of use cases on this. I mean, McDonald's tried to do it a couple of years ago and ordered somebody like 200 something chicken nuggets right through a drive-through because their AI messed up. And corporations and companies that maybe try and switch to some sort of AI-based learning too soon, I think are going to find out that there's expertise that they're lacking. So what this means for all of us is you need to tout the human element of this, right? AI is soulless. If you read AI, you can tell you're reading AI because there's nothing in it, right? If you just take a straight prompt and go, write me a paragraph on this, it's going to be a bland, boring paragraph that you can tell it's by AI. But injecting that human element into it and using that to write your first draft and then you review it, that's helpful, right? Using AI as a tool instead of looking at it as a competitor, I think is probably the best approach to take. I've been using it personally, like for a myriad of things, to help me write outlines, right? But I'm not using what it gives me as the final result. I'm using that as a base to start with. Or I'm also using it to where I'm feeding it information. Here is how I've written something. How can I improve it? Give me feedback on what I've written, right? And in a lot of cases, I have a hard time getting in touch with my boss. My boss is a very, very busy guy. I report to one of the officers of the company, and he also deals a lot with revenue and marketing. So what I do is a very small fraction of what he cares about. So I can't just bounce ideas off of him or get feedback from him. I use AI to pretend like it's an executive and give me feedback on things. So that's how I've been using it. I'm sure there's a myriad of other uses out there. I'm sure the other panelists can speak up on that too.
I actually love using AI for the scenario-based learning, because I'd have a hard time coming up with, what would this person say in this scenario? So I'll tell it, you're a resident who's experiencing dementia and you're wanting to go home, but you don't understand why you can't go home. What would you do in X situation? And that kind of gives me some insight to it. But again, you can never just write it straight through, especially if you're asking for creative thinking from your user. You can't just program it and tell me to write this. You have to take the moments and say, okay, what are some ways that their thoughts could go, and what do I want them to learn from each choice? And that's not something AI can do. But generative AI for images and videos have been fantastic. Also AI for like voice creation. The funnest one I had was that my former boss would record videos for tutorials, but he often stammered or said the wrong word. So what I ended up going back and doing is I took an AI and uploaded some of his speech into it, and the AI actually, created new sound bites of him correcting me. So I was able to use, and it sounded just like him. He has a really thick New Zealand accent. It's not something we ever could have fixed. So that was terrific.
When we're talking about the industry itself, I think that we've seen AI is one of the tools, and I think it's one of the biggest tools that we've seen impact the industry. Tools change throughout time. I've been in it for a while now, and the biggest change and shift that I've seen in instructional design is that the shift from instructional design to learning experience design. We used to focus a lot on format, a lot of upfront information, assessing your audience. Those tenets of instructional design are still there. But we're now seeing more emphasis on the journey, engagement, systems thinking, and things that sometimes I'm finding just in my career, which is why you hear me say change a lot. And you'll see in my LinkedIn post, I'll talk about change a lot as well, is that a lot of learning is tied to change. And so whether that's tech adoption or workplace culture or upskilling things for future roles, I'm seeing that from the basics that I learned to now, that journey, the experience, what's happening during learning, the things that can happen and change within learning while they're learning, more scaffolding, more, more personalization of the learning. I've seen that more, my perspective.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Tanasha.
I love that perspective because I think it's incredibly important that we keep in mind that AI is like you said, a tool among many others. And I think there is definitely the sense right now that it can be the be all end all and solve every single one of our problems. But I think keeping in mind that we still do need a sort of an ethical approach to it, where we really understand the impact of it across the board, and B, really continuing to see learning as this holistic experience that is driven by a number of different factors, and that AI is just a tool to help us achieve some of that. And I think in the next 5 to 10 years, with the way that things are developing, it is going to become more than that. I think that when you're looking at kind of the trajectory of things, but certainly now, I think there needs to be also this discussion around sort of ethics and the human impact of these things as we continue to thoughtfully use them and leverage them to make our lives easier.
Great. Thank you, Laura. I do have a question too for those of you who are involved in hiring and do the hiring. Are we at the point where when you're looking at portfolios, are you looking for use of AI? Are you talking about that in interviews, or do you feel like we're not there yet? Keith, I know you hire a lot of contractors.
Yeah. So I want to make sure that they know how to use AI in the sense that they know how to use it like I described and not using it to write an entire course for me. Because if I'm hiring somebody to write a course for me and they do it through AI, well, I could have done that.
Yeah.
I'm hiring, and when I hire people too, they're not just instructional designers. I hire people that are subject matter experts that have some instructional design experience that I coach, right, to be better instructional designers. So if everything they're turning into me is AI generated, that's a conversation we're going to have, right? Of I can tell you just generated this with AI and did nothing. But I am looking for people that understand how to use it, because it can make the job much faster, right? I am able to do so much more now that I couldn't. I just got told by my boss the other day I need to write a certification exam, not like a legit accredited certification exam, but still, even for me to create a certification exam, I'm going to have to create minimum 500 questions. For me to be able to do that in the span of 2 months would be impossible without AI. At the same time, I'm not taking what AI says as the truth. I'm taking my subject matter experience and my knowledge as the truth. And I expect that out of the people that I hire too, right? So yes, I expect you to know AI, but I expect you to know what you're talking about much better than AI, so that when AI tells you the wrong thing, you can correct it.
Right. Great. Okay. Nice. Good to know. I want to move on to the next question, and then we're going to kind of get into some of the career transition, in-demand skill stuff after that. So my next question for you, just to set the scene of what's the most impactful project you've worked on? Interpret that how you may. But give the people an idea of what it's like to kind of be in the field, making an impact in this space.
I can share the most impactful project I had been on. I worked for a consulting firm. And I just want to preface this, and maybe you may get to a question, but just for everyone that's here, if you're interested and you're entering into this field, look in and study the field and the different facets, the different lanes that are in the field, and pick a lane. there's a lot of different places. It's not always under HR, just period, full stop. So look into that. But I worked with a consulting company, and we built a system for the state of Georgia, for a state. I can't say where it was for a statewide system, and I was part of that team that came in to build the training for the state users to use that system. And it was 159 counties, over 5,000 users. And we went from needs analysis all the way to implementation, post-test training, assessment, after the job type of assessments, and checking where they are operationally. So that was the biggest one. It was impactful. It was a change for the whole state. It was a change for the users. Things were more efficient and faster. The training was great, and they were able to leverage it and take things up. The way we designed it was, they had something to take as reference, like a desktop reference as well for the system. So I think it was the biggest one. It involved not only ILT, instructor-led training, but also e-learning and some with async web-based training and things like that. It was all the things, and it was dependent on what the need was and that particular content and where it would be used for the learners.
Great, nice. So you got to be involved with the full process, textbook, instructional systems design. It sounds like really cool. All right, nice. Anyone else want to share?
Sure. Devlin, I can jump in and say that I think this is something that everybody, no matter what role you're in, to be onboarded. So I have been involved in onboarding not just new hires for a company, but also then a manager onboarding. So any manager that say would be new to the company, or you're just newly a manager. And I know it sounds like pretty, onboarding. Yeah, that's right. But you have to, that's their first experience. If you think about when you start a company, how you're onboarded is really going to make a difference and set you up for success. And so I was involved in cross-functionally with all sorts of different groups within the organization to how do we bring our folks in an onboarding manner that is going to, really pull them in, make them excited, and make them learn what they need to know. Don't overwhelm. Like, there's so many different things you have to think about when you're onboarding people, and it really sets the tone for, their work with you and within the company. And so being a part of those two major builds for onboarding both managers and, new hires was, I think, had a huge impact, because what they started with and then what they ended up with was completely different. And it really did make a difference in the organization.
Nice. Yeah. So you got to really set the tone for, their entire time at the company with that onboarding experience.
I've got a great one if I could share it.
Go ahead.
I'm going to take that as a yes. So this was during COVID. And again, I was working in the residential care industry during COVID. And if there was any place where it was a complete disaster, it was there, because you've got, living with a lot of people who have compromised immune systems or otherwise vulnerable. And it was rough. So what we ended up designing was an infection control suite. So we had, leadership manuals, we had staff manuals, train the trainer sessions. And we taught our facilities to, one, designate a person who's the point person for infection control in their facility. So if there's an outbreak, if there's an instance, or even, symptoms, report it. They made the decisions on, who gets quarantined, how they do that, how guests are allowed in. And we created a series of online courses and in person. So we weren't allowed to do classroom training, obviously. So we sent, ambassadors into the facilities to do this training. And the big focus was not on killing germs. It was on keeping people well. So what's the logical thinking through that will prevent the spread of this disease? And the reason I say it's the most impactful is that we had numbers on it. Our clients instantly started reporting fewer outbreaks than the average facility during that time. So I'm certain that the way we designed this saved lives. And so it's something I was really proud of.
Nice. Yeah, having those solid numbers to see the metrics on the impact you're having must be really rewarding. Great.
That's
Laura,
so
do you want to
exciting.
go ahead?
Yeah. So, one of the things that I worked on recently that was extremely impactful was a big rollout of a sales and service model for one of the retailers that I was involved with. And this was really exciting because it wasn't just across the entire US market, it was into the international market as well. So we had to sort of deal with, cultural translation, literal translation, different labor laws, all kinds of things. What was so interesting about that was that it was, very much this kind of end to end design where we were working with a very small team, but we were able to kind of get it rolled out in a way that was, a combination of e-learning, different follow-up mechanisms, again, just across a huge population of stores. I think it was like 150 stores or something like that. It was crazy. So, but it was really wonderful because we were also able to institute a sort of like coaching follow-up program so that we didn't just roll out the entire system. We also rolled out kind of a way for the store managers to be able to coach and give sort of like on the ground feedback in real time for the folks who are learning. And I think just seeing the way that that ended up unfolding and seeing the impact of that just you know, across cultures in a way, was really, really interesting because to see your work kind of go that far and to see it have an impact like that, for me was pretty exciting. And we worked pretty hard to get it out, and it was really rewarding when it finally launched, and then when we saw the numbers too afterwards, because as we all know, launching something without measuring its effectiveness is not, it's half the job. So I think that's really been one of the more impactful things that I've worked on.
Great. And yeah, instead of just, here's some e-learning, it sounds like it was a really like holistic approach. Make sure like there, mentoring built in, yeah, real-time support from humans. That sounds nice to design for. Great. All right. Would anyone else like to share around this question before we move on to the next one?
Yeah, so the program that I mentioned that we started during the pandemic, it's called Attack IQ Academy. And it's free cybersecurity training. It's geared towards cybersecurity professionals and cybersecurity students. But you guys, I'm not counting on you working in cybersecurity to know this, but there's a huge gap in needed talent versus what's available for cybersecurity right now. And companies have kind of given up on well, you need a bachelor's degree to do this. So they'll look to people that have certifications and training and online training and all that. In fact, we have companies now that supplement their paid for security training with our training. But it was an opportunity for me to kind of run this program that does a public good. We don't charge for the security training at all that we do. So I've got to hear, since we started the program, I've got to hear from students and professionals around the world, either through LinkedIn or I've got to meet them in person, and they've got to tell me how much it's meant to them to be able to learn this new skill that they would have had to pay hundreds or even thousands of dollars for later. So that was a big impact on me. That's, when I describe my job to people, I get to tell people like, I get to do this really cool community outreach thing where I get to train people for free and I get paid to do it. And that's not something most people get to do. So.
Mhm. Great. Thank you. And then
I just want to add one thing. My internet was not super stable. I would say, that's a great question, Devlin, on the most impactful project. Just asking about like the impactful project to me, to myself, or impactful project to other people, you might get different answers. I wanted to give this message to people who are in the transitions of coming from higher educations or other areas to ID. The project that you are going to work on in your portfolio or working with Devlin is going to be one of the most impactful ones. And we want to make that count. And so that was one of the message. Another, you can move the metrics and you can I could share more something about, we moved the licensing needle from 17% to 89%. And that's pretty remarkable, over 40,000 people. But I think the one that is most impactful to you is the one that you make your career transitions and working with a community of instructional designers.
Great. Thank you, man. I like that. perspective on it. Nice. Okay, I see so many questions rolling in. Maybe I'll just ask. Do you want me to ask some more questions, or do you want to move on to the community questions? My next one is like, I was gonna ask, what are the most in-demand instructional design skills? And then after that, what's the top advice for someone transitioning into the field? Should we kind of combine those and then turn it over to the audience? Let's see what y'all think. We combine them. Okay. So we'll combine those. You can answer both, one or none. So yeah, most in-demand skills right now and your top advice for someone transitioning into the field.
I can start with just maybe some advice. I would say that you want to kind of twofold is build, when you're building your portfolio, build a sandbox too. So meaning play, try something different, look at something new. You want to stand out. So you want to think about things in a different perspective. You want to really just play, get your hands dirty, fail privately, is what I like to say. So just keep trying different things would be one. And as far as transitioning new into the field, ask why a lot. Sound like a 3-year-old or 2-year-old. I'm not sure what age that is when they say, but why? But why? You want to constantly be asking why and really get in there and ask questions and be a strategic partner instead of an order taker, which is you want to set that right out of the gate. You don't want to just say, okay, you want to ask why so that you can then be a strategic partner. So that would be my advice as far as when you're transitioning in, using that approach. So play and come up with some new ideas and different things that you can showcase, especially in your portfolio or during an interview, but also make sure that during the interview, you are able to be that strategic business partner and ask why.
Excellent advice. Thank you, Leigh Ann.
This is your ability to creatively problem solve. The stuff I put in my portfolio, I try to orient it toward here's a problem, because that not only hooks your audience, and of course we're following Ganya's 9 events here, but it shows potential employers that you can do more than write an encyclopedia entry for them, because what they're really invested in is behavior change, not knowledge. So if you start from that creative problem solving perspective and demonstrate that you can do that, it makes you a stronger candidate.
Yeah. Great advice.
And it's so great because I think, all of us are sort of thinking in the same direction. We've got, problem solving. We've got a number of other ways of approaching things through play and learning, which I think is fantastic. To piggyback off of that, I think also the sense that one of the most important things you're going to have to do as an instructional designer or as somebody in the learning and development field is to relationship build. So, a lot of you bring a wealth of kind of the knowledge that you have. You know how to do a needs assessment. You know how to determine kind of the format that things should take. You might know how to build something in Storyline 360, and that's really great too. And you also want to think about the relationships that you're going to have to build to be able to effectively make these things happen. I think, so taking the time to get to know your subject matter experts, taking the time in certain ways to also onboard them in a way to what the processes are, the way that you're going to be creating this, the stages at which you're going to need their feedback. All of that, I think, is an incredibly important part to success in any project or program when it comes to our field. So that sense of kind of, relationship building, and then through that being the consultant, being the person who is there then to create the thing that will problem solve. I think is a pretty powerful way of going at this.
I often see people that do transition. They're transitioning from teaching. That's the majority of the people that I've seen. I've seen people transition in other different ways. One recommendation that I usually have is join a group of learning professionals. I will share some links inside. If you're in LA, please join with ATDLE. I'm one of the board members. Be a volunteer and be part of it. Be part of that and get active. And so you'll be able to network. Also, TLDC, they are awesome. They're in LinkedIn as well. If you join, you can get into their Slack as well. It's cheaper than ATD or TD.org, but those are professionals on places you need to go. But TLDC, they really do have a lot. Teachers in transition and other people in transition, software people in transition to ID. Really good resources, really good teaching and workshops that I've actually done a couple of them. Also, when I talk about picking a lane, and I saw a question in there, I'm going to have to read it again and answer in chat. But when I'm talking about picking a lane, I'm talking about, let me see, I'd done a presentation on this as well, trying to break some of this down. I'll break it down some more. I can share a document and give it to Devlin so he can share it out. I don't know, but I'm talking about pick one of these lanes. Are you going to work in corporate L&D? Are you going to do consulting? Are you going to do just curriculum development or your own consulting? Academic L&D is different as well. Government, nonprofit L&D, those different things. Pick a lane, figure out where you can be best, what outcomes you can contribute to a little bit more. Then you can actually kind of pick where you are. Look into those different places and look at those job descriptions. A lot of times, corporate L&D falls under HR. I see that a lot. When you hear L&D, it's usually an AR HR thing. Or when you see the job descriptions, it'll say under the direction of the HR, blah, blah, blah. And a lot of times they want you to have HR background. So if you're not that, find somewhere else to go. But I will answer that question I see in chat a little bit further. And Devlin, I'll
Great.
you on what I can share.
Perfect. Okay, thanks, Tanasha.
There's another thing that I want to build on top of everyone was talking about. Problem solving is definitely a great orientation. I categorize things in terms of like people skills and technical skills or competencies. So things that you can learn in bootcamp, of things that you can learn in your spare time. So definitely honing on your technical skills and use the tools that AI, whatever tools is helpful for you. The people skills like Lauren's talking about, like a relationship building. If you are working in a corporate, you're going to have very hard business part. You're going to have many difficult conversations, and how you show up in those conversations and how you navigate that. And sometimes you deliver no without saying no. And so those kind of things, and you probably want to intentionally practice. And I remember when I was in the boot camp, people give me a lot of feedback. And sometimes I'm like, oh, just give me a day. And sometimes if you respond defensively, that would kind of like, people will perceive you in a certain way, right? So you wanted to know like how to navigate those conversations, a little bit of that. And building on when you go into big meeting, have many stakeholders and trying to question your ideas, or even they put a different spin on that, like how you responded to that. And one small tip that I learned is when I present some solutions, I make sure that everyone else understand the problem. We are on the same page. And having different variations of the solutions. And so I'm kind of like explaining the pros and cons. And so people, you won't end up being in a place where you are presenting something like one versus infinity, right? So you kind of scope some of the solution and help you to navigate that conversation. So I think the people competencies you can practice.
Great. So yeah, I'm hearing that from Min. Laura, I'm seeing a lot of nodding from the panel. Sounds like a lot of like the hard skills, like the technical skills, the ID theory, that stuff is out there. You know, it's easy to find. You can memorize it all. You can practice your tech skills. But what y'all are saying is like, don't neglect the people skills, because that's going to have a really big impact on what your experience is like on the job and what kind of impact you're able to make.
Yep.
So a lot of relationship building, consensus building. Yeah. Great.
I want to add that some of you will hear, and I think you should, if you find a workshop, we actually did one ATD, a workshop on leading without authority. You will be using that skill a lot. Leading or influencing without authority. That's something that's important to know. And most every learning project that I've that I worked on, it often is coming from a change initiative or something. So know a little bit about change and change management or how to support change.
Excellent. Great feedback. Okay, great. Are y'all ready to open up to the audience? Let's see. We have 15 minutes left and some people have to step out. I can hang out for an extra 30 minutes and I know not else who's available. Feel free. But yeah, my next questions are about like personally what helped people on this panel stand out the most in their career, and just a side one about like is a portfolio important? What are your views on portfolios? I've been seeing a lot of good questions in the chat too. So, and
I
did any of
have
those questions speak to any of you all? Do you have any strong thoughts or opinions?
I have a strong opinion about portfolios. A
All
strong
right, let's hear it. Let's hear it.
Um, it depends on where you are in your career. I feel that if I'm being asked for my portfolio, now, mind you, I'm a seasoned career person. You see this great. If I see a job description that asks for a portfolio, I know that it is not the job for me as a seasoned
Yeah.
professional, right? Because that is more hands-on. Usually they're asking for some e-learning, some visuals and things like that. Also
Mhm.
more evidence of instructional design and application and everything. But I'm beyond that. I'm more of a strategist, and operations person now. But I see that as I would ask for as an employer, if I'm asking for a specific job, yes, I want a portfolio, but I don't think it's calls for in everywhere. I think the plus and the important thing to do is no matter what you do, this is my strong opinion, is that everyone should have a portfolio. I even have a portfolio because you never know when a specific skill set is asked for that you want to make sure that you showcase. And you should be able to build that throughout your career. You should be adding to your portfolio. So that's my 2 cents.
Great. I like that. It's a nuanced perspective. Very helpful.
I definitely agree about the portfolio. When I was applying for my most recent position, I included a lot of games in my e-learning portfolio, and every single person who interviewed me at that company had something to say about how fun the games were, or like what this challenge was. We ended up getting way off topic on the interview just because they wanted to talk about the games and the scenarios. So I think if you have a portfolio that really grabs attention, it speaks a lot more than that, that one line that says, "Oh, I have a master's in blah," because they can interact with it and actually see what it is that you can do.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Marie. Yeah, I definitely relate to that experience. People getting excited about the more fun portfolio projects. Laura,
I admit that my portfolio included that the avatar picker that you
Yeah.
put a video up for.
long time ago now.
And put it in my portfolio. They loved it.
Nice, nice. Laura, I know you're going to say something, and then we'll welcome Frank here.
Oh, I mean, I was just going to add to the conversation by saying, yes, the portfolio is incredibly important. And I think it's not just about the tech skills that you showcase. I've seen, I would say, in the last few years, just a really strong emphasis on tech skills, which is not a bad thing. We need to have them. We need to know how to do all of that. We need to make sure that we're making digital learning accessible, interesting, fun, short, which is the other challenge sometimes. But the portion that I wanted to add to is just something that I know Devlin does in the boot camp as well, which is to really explain your thought process behind certain things. To showcase kind of the way that you go about things, the way that you problem solve, the way that you work together with SMEs, the way that you do all of those things is an incredibly important part of those soft skills that come together with the tech skills, I think, to make someone who is just an incredibly powerful instructional designer or person in the L&D space. So my 2 cents.
Great. Thanks, Laura. All right, welcome, Frank. We might be wrapping up here in a little bit, but
Sorry about
let's go
that.
and make it on for the end.
Yeah.
Do you want to give people a really brief intro of kind of how you got into the field and made it to where you are now?
Sure. Thanks, folks. I'm sorry I'm late today. I had some issues. But I'm Frank from Chicago, home of the Pope. And my background's been, I transitioned many years ago in another life as like elementary classroom teacher. So I transitioned out of being an elementary classroom teacher for many years into corporate training and instructional design. And from there, just kept working my way through different career opportunities.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, Frank. And Frank is a member of our advisory committee, so thanks for reviewing that curriculum for us. Anyone have any final perspectives on portfolios before we turn it over to some audience questions? All right. Let's see what we've got here. I'm just going to go down the list. And then also, I know some of you might have a hard stop in 12 minutes, so feel free to step out as needed. I'll be here for the next like 40 minutes or so. Great. Okay. Let's see. Anyone on the panel, like I know Tanasha, you saw a question that you like particularly wanted to respond to. Maybe that's a good place to start. Can y'all see that question screen also?
Yeah. It was a question from Shireen. She said, in the ever-evolving field of learning and development, where many roles require us to wear multiple hats, from instructional design and course development to learning experience design, evaluation, and full strategy management, how do you determine the right lane to focus on? How do you balance specialization with the broad expectations of modern LED roles? And what guidance do you offer someone trying to carve out a suitable and fulfilling path within this space? So one, my original referring to lanes were about the more about the sectors, but here Shireen is asking about if you're talking about the different facets within learning design, again, course development or evaluation or strategy and those different things. Sometimes you do have to wear multiple hats. A lot of times I try to figure out what hat best fits me, where can I best influence the outcome, and where do I feel safe and secure and confident, and let me hone that skill. Some people hone their skills in evaluation and they become evaluation. Broadly, you should know a little bit of all of it so that you can either direct or contribute to it. But if you want us to be in course development and content development, you can choose that as your expertise and be the person to do that, the person to do assessments, the person to do only instructional design or specialize in e-learning, which is also the skill that a lot of people are looking for as well. Because we all can't be the graphic designer, we all can't be the e-learning person and the voiceover person. We can't do all those things. So how you find that is just, where do I fit that I feel that I can have the most influence? And start there and just work from that point.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Tanasha. I've also seen some questions around freelancing. People are curious about any panelist freelancing experience, maybe any suggestions for freelancing. Does that speak to anyone here?
Yep. It's a struggle. I freelanced for 9 years and then I stopped and got into the corporate world, and I'm going back into freelancing. But I can tell you, you start small. When I got into freelancing, I actually offered my services. I volunteered my services. And people were able to get a sample of what I did, and I got recommendations from that, referrals from that. And I built my portfolio from that. I have a real and actual client that I did XYZ from, and here's the work that I did. So I really started that way. Definitely check your local state areas with regard to business licenses, the cost of it, and things like that before you get into it. See if you really want to do that, or do you just want to kind of be a individual contractor and do a 1099 here and there, whether we're going to run a business or 1099, make those decisions. I did put my information in LinkedIn, my LinkedIn information in chat. So let's talk.
Great. Anyone else want to speak on the freelancing side of things?
I did a little bit of freelancing just on this side. So I always had the regular, 9 to 5, but decided to do some freelancing on the side. And that actually started in 2020 with, the result of higher ed needing to get everything online. So I ended up getting into it that way is, hey, we need help Everything has to suddenly go online. And so I started freelancing that way. So then what happened was when I stopped doing that, word of mouth. So you kind of get in with that first freelance project, and then, everybody in the L&D community reaches out and says, "Hey, do you know anybody?" And, "Oh, yeah." And then it just kind of snowballs from there. So I would say being able to get that kind of first project, but once you do, you'll see that lots of conversations are always happening and people will just continue to, send your name along if you're doing a good. And kind of going in with that, I also saw a question in the beginning from Kimberly asking about transitioning from higher ed into corporate or freelancing as well. And I would say that the most important thing for all of them is, whether you're corporate or you're freelancing, is understanding business acumen. That is huge, because in higher ed, you really don't have to worry too much about that. In corporate, you have to understand the business and understand business acumen. So I would say to set yourself apart from somebody going in from teaching higher ed and trying to get into corporate, it's a different world because of the business. So, and that goes with freelancing too, understanding the business of how freelancing kind of works.
Okay. I imagine there might be some follow-up questions around the freelancing side, but I do want to ask, I'm going to combine some questions here. Portfolio project tips. Is there anything in particular that hiring managers want to see, especially, in a competitive market? Like, do we need Articulate Storyline 360 in our portfolio? Do we need, do you recommend an AI project? That was my attempt at combining 4 questions. If it's, any aspect of that you want to respond to would be helpful, I think, for people here.
I definitely look for the story with whatever people are giving me when I'm looking at a portfolio. I don't like just visuals. I want to know the story. So as y'all talked about, and what Devlin and what Peck Academy teaches, is that you have a little bit more context and story and thought process in it. That shows that I actually am bringing on someone that's a bit of a lead thinking aspect of it, not just a worker bee. Hey, this is what I'm showing out versus this is what I thought through. That's what you should look for, is the story.
Great.
Playing off what Tanasha said, yeah, just to have the ability to show that you have some T-shaped skills, right? That you have some breadth. So not all, you can definitely showcase your articulate storyline and other tools and aspects, but providing that context around, the project, some of the decisions you made from a design point of view, and what was the overall business problem or performance issue you were trying to address with what you designed, right? I think what you want to look for is, you want to see versatility and more of a T-shaped type of person, right? So if your portfolio is entirely storyline and that's all you're doing, then you should be applying just for a storyline position, right? But most hiring managers are looking for T-shaped skills. They are looking for your specialization too, but you want to be able to portray yourself broadly as well. Some of your skills, not only in instructional design, but if you'd had to do some of the heavy lift of managing projects where you may have been on a smaller team or a smaller experience. And if you have some insight into how you effectively managed different challenges in a project that you worked on.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Tanasha. Thank you, Frank.
I can speak
yeah.
from one of the last times I did some hiring where it wasn't a contract position, where I was hiring full-time position for my team. First thing I did was I went and looked at LinkedIn portfolios. Not necessarily like what you created in terms of a full course, because I don't have time to sit down and take your full course to see how good or bad it is. But I do have time to go through your LinkedIn and see what you're posting and how, if you're posting educational things, are you active in the community? Remember how I talked about how I like to combine SMEs with instructional designers? So I'm also looking for like SME credibility within that LinkedIn stuff too. Now, when the interview comes around, I tell everybody ahead of time, I give them all the exact same assignment. On the interview, you are going to teach me how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. It's something that everybody knows how to do. You can present it to me. You can talk me through it. I recommend you present it to me, but you can talk me through it if you want. I want to know how you teach. I want to know how you figured out the best way to present this material, and then you presented it to me. Once they presented it to me, we're gonna have a conversation about how they did that, right? And I'm not a big believer in taking up a ton of people's times and homework for interviews. That's why this one's super simple, right? It takes maybe 5 minutes of prep to sit down and figure out, like, I'm going to do a presentation on how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So I think it's really just, it's important to be able to articulate the skills that you have and to show them off regularly on LinkedIn. Even if those skills aren't in instructional design yet, take what you have, because you have skills in something, and start teaching people about it.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah.
Something I've done with items in my portfolio is to explain why they're there and what skills I use to create them. One in particular, I spend time explaining adult learning and where those concepts come out in the module, in a micro learning module. You can point out, well, adults make things stick with, critical thinking. And so here's where I engage that. Or humor keeps your learner engaged. So, I included this joke or silly sound.
Yeah.
So don't just show it, like, tell why this is so cool. Why do I want you to look at this?
Yeah. Perfect. Talking through that design process and how you made your decisions. Excellent. I also know we do have about 1 minute left before some people need to step out. So thank you everyone who could attend. Well, I'm going to keep it going for a little longer if anyone in the audience wants to hang around and keep getting some questions answered. I'd also like to take a few seconds just to plug that we did open applications for Peck Academy. So most of the people on this panel were gracious enough to review, or were nice enough to review all of our curriculum, and it was super long. We do help you build a really good portfolio and learn the business acumen, the tech skills, all of the above. So if anyone is interested, those apps will be open for a week and a half. This is our first official cohort of our license program. So thank you all for being here with us to kind of celebrate with us. Again, this was going to be a party, but instead it was a panel discussion. And I had fun. It was less pressure. Yeah. Months of planning and work for a party just didn't seem right. Cool. All right. So thank you, everybody. I've seen more follow-up questions come in and stuff. And yeah, for anyone who has to hop onto another meeting or has a hard stop, thank you again, and we'll be in touch soon. Yeah. Is anyone from the panel sticking around?
I'm sticking around.
Okay, great.
No time.
Great. Okay. All right. So let's just keep it moving. I saw another good question in here. Where did it go? Okay. So in the real world, what sort of instructional design models do you use? Like ADDIE, for example, other formal processes? Yeah. Is it like the textbook, or what's it like in real life?
You know what? It's second nature. ADDIE is second nature where I am. ADDIE is second nature. Is automatic that you follow these processes, right? That process, that format, that model. Within that, so it's not always said out loud. The only time it's said out loud is if you're working with a client and you say, we're using this is the methodology. But overall, the methodology that we're using, that I actually find myself doing, is a little bit of ADDIE plus agile. It's really iterative. It's an agile instructional design process that we're going through. And what that means is all those things that, if you haven't looked it up or you're not quite understand what I'm saying, when I'm saying agile, is just really we do a lot of things with ceremonies. We do retroactive assessments of what we've done. So we're following through our normal learning design process with iterative changes in between, and consult with the client. And that's only because where I work, our learning courses or whatever, our content is our product. Okay. And so that we're building a product. And so we're taking an iterative methodology towards building these things, either with our with consult of our clients or our internal stakeholders for what that product is. That's what we do. So yeah, we do use those things.
Yeah, I could definitely relate to what you said, how they just kind of become second nature, and it's like you're doing it without really like, okay, let's move into this phase now.
Yeah.
It's just like all a constant part of the job.
And you just have an expectation that when you're hiring an instructional designer, that they're falling right in line following this process. You expect them to have done some needs analysis. You expect them to have some objectives in your just
Yeah, for sure.
Often you don't have the luxury of time. So what I found is a mixture of SAM and ADDIE together and
Yes.
being able to rapidly prototype something. You may not have the ability to go through every waterfall stage of ADDIE to get to that final product. By bringing that a prototype of that final product, whether it's an e-learning course, a micro-learning, or even an instructor-led class, by bringing it forward in the process, you can get greater feedback and shorten your time to market on the other end when you're doing the development. I think most companies, and what you'll find in the organizations I work for, is time is a luxury you don't have. So you've got to be able to still maintain the integrity and learning design with ADDIE, but you got to be able to manage that work in such a way that you get shorter time frames.
Great. Did you want to share a perspective on that, Maria, or should we see what other questions people have?
Oh, well, clients typically love it when you draw out the ADDIE process for them. Often they're not willing to pay for every step, particularly the evaluation step. Yeah, I did. Usually I have to truncate it because a client approaches me and they want to do all this training, next month. So I have to just start with questions on what's your business goal, what's your behavior, and work backwards from there. I try to ask questions that kind of directly relate to action mapping. So once I got a concept of what their how their business model works, I start asking about what are some real world things that your team members have to do day in and day out, and what kind of behaviors do you want to see there? But one thing I like to add to the ADDIE process is that iterative moment, which can be challenging when you're working on a client's timeline.
Great. Okay. Let's switch it up a bit because I know Carla asked a question earlier that I think got some pretty good, a lot of people are interested in. When going for a coffee chat with other instructional design professionals, what are some of the most helpful questions that a new or aspiring instructional designer could ask during those chats, in your opinion, to get the most insight maybe about the role or?
I think it's good to have a curiosity around their journey a little bit and how they got into it. And then also asking them about how they were able to stretch their skills and broaden their imprint in the organization. What did they do in terms of volunteering for certain types of projects? What did they do outside of the organization? So I think just trying to bring it to a personal level as well, just to see what their journey was.
I agree with that. I also think that they should ask about, I don't know how to quite phrase this, but what the culture of process and expectations are. I'm a process-oriented person, but I found that a lot of people really need to catch up with how they process through a thing. Like when you all do instructional design here, what does that look like from start to finish? You should ask that question. What end the design looks like at that organization, and have them break it down for you. And if they can't verbalize it for you, you may find some gaps that you can fill, and you're like, oh, I can probably do more of this and fill that gap there and find your niche.
Yeah, that would be a really good question. Get an idea of what it would be like there.
Yeah, because I think maybe 6 times out of 10, you'll find that they don't even do evaluation.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yep. If not more than that.
I've seen a lot of the big questions that I would suggest asking here already. What are the top skills that I need? What's the best way to look for a role? How do I make networking connections? What should be in my portfolio? I think beyond that, I would just ask them what they like about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because finding your passion in something kind of helps you direct where to your activities.
Yeah. Okay, great. Any follow-up questions around that, Carla? Is that helpful? Okay, nice. Shireen has a question. How can I assess what I'm missing from my skill set?
I was about to respond to your stream. Look at the sample portfolios that Devlin has up there. And if you can say, oh yeah, I can do that, it's awesome. Or if you look at something and say, maybe I should learn how to do that. That's the best way to go because those are real life examples of things that you're looking for.
Yeah, we have our competencies that we just developed for our like career school. I could share those too if you want to kind of like look at each of those and do a self-assessment. Also, like the Association for Talent Development has like a model, and I know it's been popular for a while, and they like update it continuously, where they kind of talk about all the different like core competencies in the field based on their research. You can try to find that for you.
Another technique that I've done is, you're probably out there looking for a new role or your career areas, and you might have 3 or 4 positions that you've already applied to that have attracted you. I would lay them out and look at what do you see as far as consistency across them in terms of some of the competencies, and then try to map that back to your experiences, and then see if you have can further map it back to anything that you've done that you may have either in a public or private portfolio that you've saved.
Yeah, that'd be great. I
Yeah.
have those competent. Oh, go ahead.
Definitely perusing the LinkedIn job postings and just looking what skills are on there is very helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have these competencies pulled up, but they're in a PDF, so I don't think they'll easily copy and paste. Let's see. I think I went through them in my latest YouTube video too, if you wanted to grab that. I kind of scroll through all of them. But yeah, around like performance improvement, instructional design, assessment and evaluation, project management and collaboration, developing engaging e-learning, creating some advanced interactions, developing effective assessments, and then like publishing e-learning content, visual design, integrating AI, and then it kind of ends with professional branding and presentations. So yeah, it's a little more like individual contributor focus for, if you're going to be doing the ID and development. Some roles you might not do any development. Some roles you might be doing a lot of it. So it can still depend a lot on the actual role you get.
I see a question about salary in there. I don't know if you guys have covered that or.
No, we haven't. Go for it. Yeah.
So that's always an interesting question you'll see on applications. I had just went through a transition for the last 7 months in my career where I encountered that question quite often. And, in certain job descriptions based on the state they're in, they may reveal the salary range, right? The middle or the high end or the low end of that range of salary. And you're looking at that and you're like, oh, wow, I want to go for that high end. But that's the reality of that is they're not at that high end of that salary. They're more at that lower end or that midpoint of the salary. And then it also plays to what the position is and the type of experience. But you really need to have some candid conversations with your recruiter that's going to be talking with you during the initial phone screen. Ask them what's been budgeted for this position. Is this position? Are you backfilling this position? If they are, they already know what the salary range is. If it's a new position, they may not be able to give you a precise salary, but most of the time I find the recruiters, because you're there for them, right? You are gold to them. They want to position you as a potential client, potential hire for their client internally, right? So you don't want to really mess around with, the salary. You want to be honest about what do you need. And is that in the range for that position, right? I'd had one recruiter say to me, hey, just tell me exactly what you need. I want you to know this salary is at this range. Is that going to be something you're going to be able to, live off of and maintain where you were, and you'll find if you just ask the question more directly. But even on the online applications, I'll put $1 in. I'll just put the dollar in to get past the application. So.
Yeah, and I've learned a lot of times, and they said this to me, the range is basically saying your range. If you got hired, this is the highest you'll go. So if you want to go higher than that highest point at some point, maybe that's not the job. Maybe that's not the job for you. But yeah, I try to stay competitive in my expectations or realistic in my expectations. And I actually look at not their range, but the role and what they're asking to do and kind of surf out what I'm seeing as far as the salaries for that role and that position and that work and that skill. And then add to it my value, my years of experience and how I fit there. And then I kind of come up with a number. And I think it's fair. And I would say I think this is fair based on my experience, based on what you're asking and on the competitive rates that are out there. This is what I would expect.
Great. Yeah. It's a good approach. Do you have any thoughts on that, Marie?
I'm not the person to ask about salary negotiations. I would just say, try and imagine your worth and then add at least 10% to it. Like you see a job application and they list like a zillion skills. That's the unicorn they're looking for. Don't discount yourself. So whatever you were paid in your last role doesn't matter. So I look up the state averages and standard salaries and but you kind of just have to ask yourself, what am I worth? And then add to that because you probably underestimated.
Okay, there's another question, changing gears a bit, about minimum number of modules you should put in your portfolio. I have some thoughts around this. Do any of y'all have strong thoughts around this?
My portfolio has been a huge challenge because most of what I do is owned by my employers. So if I want to put it in my portfolio, I have to recreate it. Like I've got a really great Beyond video I'd love to put up, but my Beyond license is through my employer, so I can't really justify, using it for a personal portfolio. That's definitely my biggest challenge. In terms of number, I would go for variety, have a good preview of an eLearning course, show a RISE course, a quick PowerPoint if you're going to be looking for IT positions, Beyond videos.
Yeah. The other thing I would suggest is think about your portfolio at different levels, right? So you have that front-facing portfolio that's out there. Anyone can look at, your potential recruiters, your hiring manager, but save some of the other stuff because they're going to ask you as you go through the interview process for additional samples of your work, and you can use that opportunity. So you have kind of a additional portfolio because your portfolio is a living thing, right? So you're gonna hopefully caretake it and nurture it. So save some stuff back that you feel you can use as you work your way into that further in the interview process.
Yeah. I used to recommend like 3 projects on a portfolio to show some of that range, like Marie was suggesting. But through the bootcamp, we've been finding that this flagship project, this like scenario-based one that solves a real-world problem and shows off the technical skills, has been really effective. Just like one high production value, one that kind of checks a lot of different boxes. A lot of people have been getting hired and doing well with just that single project on their portfolio. So we found that like quality is definitely better than quantity when it comes to your public portfolio. So
Great.
I think it's great to have supporting projects if you want to show off in more varied skills, but one really solid one can kind of get you where you can most likely get you where you want to go as long as you check the right boxes. That's my perspective on it. I have an interesting question. It's a little personal, maybe. Maybe this changes over time, but do you love what you do every day? I think that was a question from Bianca. Yeah,
I
Bianca.
do. The field is awesome. You can train to switch and you still stay within.
Yeah.
So I really love that. I've liked my ability to transition. I've kind of taken a step back from building and developing content to strategizing on what the content should be and what we should be looking for and things like that. And then I can go back in because I may want to almost like a inception or be really a meta on training the instructional designers to do instructional design a little bit better. So I'm still building kind of content and I'm keeping my skills within the field, even though I'm not touching and building for the products. It's great. It's awesome. And I'm also I'm a process person. So anytime I get a chance to change process and make things better and smoother and like, hey, these are the templates we're going to use. and
Mhm.
align properly with everything that we're using as far as tools to build what we have, it's great.
I echo those comments. I think it's an exciting field. You can do a lot of different things and you get exposed to a lot of different opportunities to help from everything from, performance consulting to doing e-learning development. And I'm working on leadership development right now in terms of programs and strategies. But there are days where you have frustration. There are days where you need that support system and you need to, find ways to manage some of that and cope with that, right? Because the pressures of day-to-day work are going to get to you over time, right? And so I think you get a point in your career where you need to figure that out for yourself. How are you going to, don't take things home with you. Try to have that work-life balance and have some support system.
Yeah. Yeah. Great feedback.
For me, it's a really complicated question. I adore the work and I love learning new techniques and pretty much anything Devlin presents something I try to learn. However, working with clients and, working in someone else's company, I get restrictive on being able to use those things because they want it done now. They don't want a beautiful beyond video. They just want, give me a PowerPoint that I can show my employees.
Yeah.
So that's the part that can be frustrating. Clients change their minds or they don't give you the information you need to teach their team members. Collaboration gets complicated because, if you have 10 people designing something, you're going to have 10 different opinions about what it should be like. So frustrating moments for me are when the creativity kind of gets stifled. But the really rewarding stuff is when you see your learning experiences pay off and you get that feedback from the client, like, oh yeah, the way you compared buy-in and motivation really, showed me how I can, keep my employees moving from one day to the next. Or the infection control thing was definitely extremely rewarding. So yeah, creativity is great, but you need to be prepared to write very specific contracts, draw boundaries with your own company, and really defend your work-life balance because it especially so it can really I could be up all night if I let my job really take over.
Marie makes a good point, though, that goes back to choosing what you want to do. If you want to just do straight up curriculum development, heads down, build the content, or versus being out there and talking to the stakeholders and the clients, make that decision because a lot of people that are curriculum development and learning design, they just want to design the learning. But they don't want to have to interact with clients. Sometimes we be working on the enterprise side and you have to work with clients and talk and be accountable. Not everyone wants to do that. They just want to design. So you need to make it clear what you want to do for sure. If you're working to corporate L&D, sometimes it's just the stakeholders you're talking to, or sometimes you're not, you're just a step away from that and just getting the orders. So figure that out. Ask questions. Like, where am I in this whole scheme, in the scheme of things?
But one strategy, though, is if you are trying to maximize the number of roles you can apply for, is learning how to write contracts and draw boundaries. Because those things don't have to be painful. So if they end up being part of the job, just find a way to minimize the pain there.
You mean write your own contracts for yourself? Is that what you mean?
Well, so I've had to work with my company. They started with very vague statements of work, and so they end up having clients go back, afterwards, projects and going, you know what, we only want 1 hour of this, so that's all we're going to pay for. Or, oh, I know you wrote this module for 24 people. We're going to have a 200 person.
Yeah.
Just making contracts more clear. And then in terms of working, with my company, I've declared that Wednesday is my blackout day and I do nothing but create. You just have to learn how to balance those things.
Yeah, you're really speaking to my first year of experience in the field. Because I started as a freelancer and I was 22, and then there are these people who are like, yeah, let's do this. It's gonna be this way, and then I sign a contract, and it's like a whole different, it's a way of balloons. And I'm like, I don't know how to say no. I'm trying to be professional, people pleaser, and all of this. So that first year was really rough, learning how to actually stand up for myself and set boundaries, and then be really careful with contracts and scopes going forward. So definitely tough on the freelancing side, having to learn those lessons because a rough wake-up call.
Massaging clients can be really, really a delicate business. Devlin, I told you about my client who sent something back because there were too many W's.
Yeah, stay away from those W's. But okay, great. I see a lot of questions around portfolios and people wanting us to look at their portfolios. I don't think this is going to be the session for that, but what this is telling me is that it sounds like y'all would like a panel portfolio review session potentially, where we could have a panel review user submitted portfolios in real time, talk about what works, what might have some room for improvement. Would that sound helpful for you all who want the portfolio help? Okay, we can schedule something like that. I think this one we're probably gonna. Okay, nice. Lots of enthusiastic yeses. Cool. Okay, and then maybe we can invite the panel again as well. No pressure right now, but we can send out some invites too to kind of build a group of people so it's not just me. And yeah, get some diverse portfolio perspectives for you all. Cool. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for hanging out here with us for an hour and a half. Thanks to our advisory committee for again making it all work in their busy work days. Feel free to connect with them all on LinkedIn. Let our committee and panel know how much we appreciate them coming today. I learned some stuff. I hope you all did too. All right. Great. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Talk
you,
to you all
everybody.
soon.